Boop.
Okay. So everybody got your notes pulled up? I was trying to get them printed, and I specifically had them in a larger font for you, but obviously.
No, guys, okay. I read them all this morning when I was sitting in the parking lot.
Cool. I mean, we can go ahead and get started right now if you guys want to. I mean, it's close enough. Okay. And we don't have anything coming right behind us. I think we go.
2 more minutes.
2 minutes.
If somebody comes late and they'll have missed the intro.
Who are those people up there?
Meanwhile, behind the facade of this innocent-looking bookstore.
He said he was a librarian. What?
That's probably going to come up. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you for coming.
Brittany's I see.
Reasons I was right.
Oh, I didn't see her over there.
This is why I can't take her anywhere. I constantly get the finger waggle.
Oh my.
Or the Brittany side eye. I do something and she gives me that Robert Downey Jr. meme look where he's just
Goodness.
I can't even contradict you because then you would be right.
see, I mean.
Well, we have 1 minute, so I'm gonna give our swag to our new.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So 3 books is 3 nights.
Is that cool? You can get little buttons or something for the games.
Love this.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, there you go. All right, welcome. We have swag.
Oh,
I can have your magnets, we have buttons.
thank you, Shane. Thank
You
you.
got it. Gentlemen, swag for you, magnet, button, or keychain. Keychains? I have more than you can look up here, or that's night or what? All right, welcome.
It's 10:30.
Okay. Everyone's got swag, this moderator? Get on away. What time is it? It's time to begin.
Yep.
Okay, so it's time to begin. Welcome everyone to the first panel of the con. Kudos for
First day of the con. Yeah.
Welcome to Phoenix Fan Fusion.
We are Lost Tribes Gaming. We're a regular game group, likes to have fun together, and
She always introduces us like
I'm just trying to be like we're not like
Not
celebrities or
the shadow.
anything.
Yeah.
We're not famous. We're just regular people. But we have a gaming group, and we stream on Twitch, Lost Tribes Gaming, and we play a number of different RPGs. And so we were trying to think of a different sort of panel from our usual ones. So heads, fun with flaws. Do we want to introduce people first?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to start with you.
Okay. My name's Brittany. I'm one of the, I don't know, longest play counts, because you've been doing this a lot longer than
Well, in the
me,
group,
but
I mean, you would definitely have the OG title.
I suppose. We as a group have been together since 2018. Still going strong. So in our Vampire the Masquerade game, I am the Baron of the city. That's the leader of the local vampires. Sort of by process of elimination, but
So you guys came here as okay, right? Okay.
we're trying to do what we can with that. In my regular life, I'm also an artist and a writer, and I do a lot of crafting things. Jerome?
Okay, well, my name is Jerome Lambert. I'm the head storyteller and I guess creator of Lost Tribes Gaming. It was my crazy idea to get a gaming group together, and it just kind of kept expanding from there. I have been gaming in some form or fashion for 34 years-ish, something like that. It's actually creepy because I had the realization that I've been gaming longer than some people have been alive. So I'm becoming 50 this year, and so I'm like, yeah, now I feel it. So I run all the games that we play, or that we play in, and when we spoke to Anthony, or actually he spoke to us about eventually doing panels, the idea was to start trying to get some of the club together and just start talking about workshop stuff, you know, like things that other people might be interested in, which is one of the reasons why we did this particular panel. The idea, if you've seen Big Bang Theory, the idea came to us, Sheldon's Fun with Flags. So the idea was like that uncomfortable initial pitch of like, you know, this is Dr. Sheldon Cooper's Fun with Flags. You know, so but that was kind of the idea for here too. But that is me, and kick it over to you.
I am Todd Parent. When you say, like, I've been playing like D&D since 1981, I think is when I got involved. So
That's before I was born.
yes, there you go.
Just barely.
Just barely. I played a lot of different gaming systems in the Army. There was all kinds of crazy things. Like role play in the Army is just, if there's nothing else to do, let's go role play or play Magic. That's the other one that we did. My main character in the stories right now is Henri. He's a vampire. As far as flaws go, they're fun. They called him the librarian because he loves his books, and then we found out how he made his books. And then,
His books are people.
Oh, they were people.
They were lost in a fire.
And they were lost in the fire, and it was devastating, but that's a whole other story.
Repurpose that.
We repurpose people. I tried my hand at storytelling and DMing, I've online or in person, and so there's all different things. So when we were talking about this panel, I was excited because when it comes to flaws, that makes your character fun. But also, how do you tailor it so it's not overpowered? So that was exciting. So off to you.
My name is Rachel. I have been gaming myself probably 20 plus years at this point as well. I also play in the vampire game. I play a character by the name of Damaris, and she's a Leanna, which is basically just a very hippie, earthy type of person. And I think that's probably like the main game I play. I also play Street Fighter as well, the tabletop version. And I mean, I'm an artist as well. By day, I'm actually a fraud analyst. So that also kind of helps play into my characters a lot, as far as investigation, and then, you know, a little bit of OCD on certain as a flaw type thing. So, yep, that's me.
And then special shout out, we've got one of our players here, Davey.
Hi, Davey.
Who actually started off watching us back in like 2019. And then eventually joined us as a player, met him here at the thing. So I want to give him a special shout out. So thanks for for being a little bit of a pack mule for us today.
I'd love to get him a t-shirt.
You bypassed
Oh,
the line.
yes, definitely, yeah, we've got to expand on that. So before she begins, one of the big ideas that they were wanting us to do at the convention, this is not going to be your typical panel where we just kind of talk and just kind of bounce stuff off of each other. We're going to be pumping you guys in the audience for comments and questions, probably throughout it as well, because they want to make it more interactive. And both ideas for our panels were with the idea, hopefully, that if you have a character or maybe you have a player in your game that might be struggling with ideas or want some character concepts or whatever have you, or you have ideas for world building, which is the next panel coming up on Sunday, either one of those, that's what it's there for. The idea is to help you workshop something for your games respectively, and, outside of the scope of other people you might play with, so that way they aren't in the loop in case you're dropping something that you don't want them to know about your character or your game or whatever have you. So, take it away, lady moderator.
Okay, so in our brainstorming about how to organize a panel with interaction, like some of these folks have mentioned, flaws do not have to be a bad thing when you're creating your characters. In fact, they can seriously enrich both the game and your character, and all the story that you're telling can ensure a more entertaining game. It can provide opportunities for your character to grow, which makes the game more meaningful. So there are lots of reasons to add flaws to your character. So we're going to talk about different types of flaws and talk about how they can be flaws, and then how those flaws can enrich your story or your character to an advantage. So we kind of separated it out into different types of flaws. For example, a physical, emotional, mental, societal, a flaw in the world context, and a magical or supernatural type of flaw. So let's talk about what kind of flaws are physical. And then, so like, we'll call on each of you, raise your hand if you want to speak. Give us an example of a physical flaw, and then we can talk about how that's a flaw and then how you can turn that to advantage. So, starting with physical.
Anybody got ideas for physical flaws? Right in the front.
Dismemberment, being an amputee of some descript.
Okay,
Okay.
good. I was
So,
like,
so something like that, you could
having
start
a
off
need to
gameplay,
dismember.
or well, you could something like that. You could start off with it in gameplay, or it could have been something that happened, in the midst of it.
in the course of the
Yeah,
game.
in the course of the game. That's a good one, because that tells could potentially tell a really good story of, like, this guy has seen something, or whatever have you, and that sort of a character could be that could be the grizzled veteran. It could be an NPC, it could be a PC, who, even if they don't say anything, something like that is very telling. It's very, usually written on their face or their body, wherever it might be. Like, the first thing that comes to my mind are like Vietnam veterans, like, when they were, or veterans in general, like when they come walking up and you see like they're wearing the American flag or something and they're missing, like, you already know, okay, there's something that went with that. There's probably some sort of a big story, behind that, and it's probably directly affected who they are and those around them. So yeah, that's a great one.
I was going to say exactly the same thing.
Okay, so let's get a little deeper. Like,
Sure.
in the course of your gameplay, how would being an amputee be a flaw, like, during your game? Like, how would that manifest in your game? It's kind of maybe like an obvious question, but like, let's get our
Well,
pattern going.
so are we defining that, just for everybody, are we defining that as starting the game off or game already in progress?
Let's say starting off.
Starting off, so starting with the character, okay.
But just like, as you're playing the game, how does that flaw manifest in the game?
Sure, okay.
I was gonna say like a flaw that happens during process, like Walking Dead, Merle, the character is something.
Oh, yeah.
Because when
Good
Merle's
example.
first introduced, he's crazy and all that, and then when he loses his hand, and comes back, it's how that changed him, it's like when you're playing your character, it's like when something happens to your character, how does that affect your character? Does your character grow with that, and it's what's difficult when you're storytelling and you're working with something is you could see it as devastating. My character lost his arm. He's useless now, or it could be my character lost his arm. How do we make that work? So.
Oh, that makes me think about How to Train Your Dragon.
Oh, another good example, yeah.
Actually, one of the examples that for me comes to mind is, anybody ever seen the movie Kingsman? Okay, do you know Gazelle?
Yeah.
The lady with basically the swords for legs, essentially.
That was gnarly.
That to me was a fantastic adaptation that she had with being an amputee. She turned those things into just deadly weapons, and she was formidable. I loved that character.
Yeah, that's actually a great example. And so obviously, if you're starting from the beginning, since we're looking at just something physical, we can skip ahead to something else here in a second. But obviously, plan-wise, and you already know, you went into it with that particular flaw for your character, so it's not a surprise. But if it happens in character, like in the course of the game, some ways to look at that would be, okay, well now maybe you need to start relying more on another player in your group. Start building up some sort of story, like maybe you've got a medic, if you're playing a fantasy game, maybe you've got a cleric who needs to now learn a specific spell type to help you regrow that particular limb, or maybe there's something else to that. I mean, the idea there is that your character doesn't have to end when something like that happens.
Damaris lost her arm when she got, my character Damaris got kidnapped by her old faction, she was tortured, her hair cut, everything, and she also lost an arm. Unfortunately, that is hard, that you can't really regrow that. So she literally, I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? I basically found a cadaver arm and reattached it and grew it that way. I had to think outside the box.
The same thing happened to Henri, remember? Like, Henri lost his jaw, and so we had to go off and
find another one.
Find
now
another
he's got a different color jaw.
This is a very common occurrence in cyberpunk game too.
But then if you're creating a character, like let's say you're doing something like a merfolk, mermaid, that occasionally has to be immersed in water. So working with that in gameplay, it's like, we're doing this and this, okay, yeah, but I gotta take a bath, or somebody with a physical, a salt bath, or somebody with a physical addiction. It could be whether it's a drug addiction or.
Well, so we're skipping forward.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's all good points. Yeah.
Because I thought that would be good.
The next one then would be emotional. So does somebody have an example we can work with that might be like an emotional flaw that somebody might have?
So this morning, as I'm building a game right now, and Jerome has been very gracious in helping me. But this morning I had the idea, I'm like, what if one of my main villains has anxiety? So all the players are like weeping up and they get there and they're like, oh my goodness, and they just have like this panic attack. So I haven't fully flushed it out yet, but it was an idea I had that what if the villain
That's actually really cool.
Scary and he was very anxious.
Right.
I think that's great. I think that really develops the villain character and almost humanizes them in a way, but at the same time you're like, this guy's really got to go down. Like, but he's got anxiety about having to be taken down.
Well, yeah, and that's a good point too. Is that whether you're starting your character off or maybe they developed it, like so for example, like Dungeons and Dragons, if you're playing and you happen to be in a dungeon, and you don't really come across this a whole lot because there's role-playing elements, but it doesn't really lend itself to like a flaw type system like that. But if you wanted to build it out, you obviously could. Just think of all the dungeons you've been in. Like, how many times have you been in there and there's just nothing but cobwebs and spiders or whatnot? That is such an easy phobia of, like, just the absolute terror of dealing with something like that, you know?
Lots of people are scared of spiders.
Right, and can you imagine, like, you know, being that character, and you're like, we're going into an abandoned house. How long has it been abandoned? And that anxiety building up, like,
Starts to manifest itself. And
you know, I'll hang out outside. You just, I'll be the safe zone. Come outside, and I'll heal you. You know, whatever your character is. You know, so there's a lot of things you can do that would, along those lines, like and you know, anxiety, that would help flesh that character out. Again, whether you make it you know, from the start or it happens thereafter, or in her case, like if you're doing an NPC, that's a great way to build some fallibility into it and chaotic responses. You know, a lot of times when people play a villain, or you know, as a GM, the idea is, because they're off in the background and doing their own thing, you don't really see them on screen a whole lot, that when they pop back up, it's, oh, this is the next part of my evil plot. You know, I've got you now, sort of thing. What if that really wasn't the evil plot? Maybe something really random happened and you realize, did they just drive by us for like some weird reason? Like they do the car pass thing thinking they were going to cut you off. You know, like they completely mistimed it because they were anxious and blew the timing on it and whatnot. And you just kind of go like, that was him. You know, and that blows their encounter. You know, that you can totally turn that into a complete different scene at that point. You know, a car chase or cart chase if you're doing something fantasy related or whatnot. Cart chase.
With D&D, one of the character classes I don't like to play, but somehow a lot of people like, is Ranger. But like one of the things with the Ranger class is that chosen enemy, you know? And so when you start talking about emotional aspect, why is that your chosen enemy? You know, did they do something? You know, so like, so you can add a whole emotional aspect to that. So like, there's a module I've ran several times as a DM, that's got these goblins out in the forest, and normally when people, like I've run, they're like, they will avoid those goblins because they know there's a clan out there. The group I'm doing right now, they find out about the goblin, they're like, let's eliminate them. I'm like, well, there's about 120, because they go off and they investigate. They have an imp that goes and comes back, and he reports to them. There's over 120 over there, and like, well, that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm like,
those odds.
There's the four of them that want to go out. They're going to go out and take out a goblin. I'm like, they're just goblins. I know, but and I'm trying to be the DM, and I'm like, well, there's women and there's children. Oh, there's no only good goblins and dead goblins. You know, and it's just, and he's playing it so well because he has this hatred, you know, like, so when it's coming out, normally when he plays the class, he's just this calm guy that communicates well with other people, but now that he found out about the goblin, his whole personality in the game has changed, and that is his goal. If you're not coming with me, I'm going alone. And the rest of the party's like, let's vote on this. He's like, well, I get 6 votes. What do you get 6? What do you get 6? So he's doing it really well with it because he's taking this emotional aspect of, and he hasn't even explained, like, with the flaw, you don't need to explain to the group why it's a flaw, why you have this emotional damage. And so they're like, what's your problem with goblins? He's like, I hate them, done. You know, and that's all he's done. He hasn't explained anything to the rest of the group. And so like, in character, they're like arguing and everything, and then out of character, there's like, dude, you got to work with us here. He's like, my character hates goblins. Why I am working with you, you know. And they're like, Todd, it's totally cool. He's playing his character, guys. It's just all right. And so judging that in and out of character and working with it, it's cool to see how you work with that. So having something like anxiety or just this irrational hatred for something. It's good to work with something like that with emotional.
Do you want to put this on the next one?
Yeah, so the next one is mental, which is a little bit different from emotional. Can we get an example of a mental flaw?
Yeah.
Addiction.
Addiction.
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
All right,
That's a
let's
good
talk
one.
about addiction.
Slice.
Things you didn't know that we were going to cover in this panel.
Yeah, I know. No, that.
Okay,
that's
so
probably-
how could addiction manifest in your game, like the bad side?
Well, I have a good example of that as far as in character, like a vampire, for example. There's flaws that you can take where you have feeding restrictions. And you could be that type of character. What?
I'm staring at
Oh.
So-
Sophie, yeah. She doesn't feed from bumps. That's her flaw. But basically, you can have these feeding restrictions, and one of those restrictions that I've seen a lot of people take is addicted to the blood of somebody that has maybe ingested drugs. So they still need to get that fixed, but the only way they could do it is to find that particular type of individual. So even as a vampire, you're still having to, as a human, you go into it with that flaw, or sorry, when you're human, you have that, perhaps that addiction that unfortunately maybe translated into the vampire, and now you're stuck with it for life. So it can bring a lot of interesting role play aspect to it, I think, because now you're having to really be, I don't know, I think it depends on how you want to play the character. You want to play it on the down low, that you're really looking for this type of person that has drugs in their system or alcohol, and try to play that off as, oh, you know what, I just want to party, so I'm looking for this type of individual. Or you can be just very paranoid about others trying to find out about why you're going with these people. I mean, it just really depends.
So how could you turn that to some kind of an advantage to enrich the game?
Well, the way I would have turned that, yeah, street knowledge. I would have turned that into finding out, okay, well, who maybe looking for the drug dealers in town, or maybe looking for that type of nefarious activity. So looking for those groups.
They would probably have a kind of an inside
Yeah,
knowledge.
inside you develop the influence,
town.
you develop contacts to be able to get those fixes that you're looking for. You could even, at some point, even develop maybe a business or take over a business that deals with drug, pharmaceutical, and stuff like that. So those are ways that you can absolutely translate having an addiction into something that is productive in character.
And something like a kind of a common thread that I'm beginning to see in a lot of this on how to twist it to enrich the game is that there's an aspect of mystery where this character that you're familiar with, assuming that it's someone else's character, suddenly acts in a way that you're not expecting, and you have to kind of figure out why they're acting that way, and that can make for a lot of really fun role play and just kind of like teasing out the secrets of your fellow players.
Yeah, and we want to emphasize too, now that we're talking more about like some serious hardline flaws too, the idea here is to help bounce ideas around to make like a more fully fleshed out character. Sometimes it's easy to, when you're writing a story or you're just making an RPG character, you put those points on your character sheet and you go like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I just have I have a penalty to X or Y or whatever. And so you occasionally pay lip service to it. And the idea here is no, it's okay to occasionally dive into that and play that out with with the players and so that they understand. Maybe it's the anxiety, or maybe it's this addiction or something that crops. You don't have to do it all the time, but it's something that will crop up occasionally in the story so that they understand, and maybe there's a redemption arc, or maybe there's a, something later on down the line that's going to help you, build into that. It's to help you flesh out a story and keep it from just being some numbers on a page, ultimately. Do you have?
Do we have any other mental flaws?
One of you guys had
had
a great one where we put Monk on there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
We
Monk.
were talking
Because,
about
like,
phobias.
Is
as
anybody
being
seen
that
Monk-
anybody
Monk,
seen
the
the TV
character,
show Monk?
Not
Okay, great.
class.
So nods, yeah, absolutely fantastic.
So the fact that he's OCD and he has these things, but he's taken that so that he can be hyper aware of what's going on around him, And he sees things that other people don't see. And so so when you're thinking about like just a mental thing that could be debilitating, he's flipped it in character to be an asset. And so that's something you can do with your characters as well. You know, like he can't sleep and that kind of thing. Like you have a character that, well, what do we do? Okay, well, you're on guard duty all the time, and so like you're the one that can't sleep at night. So there's things that you can do to make your character an asset where it was also the flaw. So what's difficult, I think, a lot of times is you don't need to always mention your flaw. Like, that's not who your character is.
Yeah, you are not your flaw.
You are not your flaw. So like, you don't have to always, well, are there goblins nearby? But are there goblins nearby? You know, it's like, no, there's no goblins nearby. Okay, just making sure, are there goblins nearby? So when that group and the rest of the group found out that he has a hatred of goblins, it was a total surprise, you know? So that doesn't have to be the driving force for your character. It's just part of your character. And so playing it well. But yeah, mental's, it's a hard one sometimes, so.
Okay, so what could be a societal flaw? Like maybe a flaw that something that is a flaw within the society that you come from or that you live in.
A strict caste system?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
the first thing I was thinking
Cool.
of too, yeah. Those darn dirty peasants.
All right, how do we want to? How could that show the bad side in your game? The bad side of that, and then we can talk about.
Well,
the
I mean,
riches.
I'm thankfully there's a lot of real world examples for something like that, like you know, those people who live on the other side of the tracks or whatever have you. You know, the first thing you could start off with is, since it's societal, obviously, you know, things aren't quite as nice over there. Maybe crime is higher, maybe this, that, or the other. You know, there's going to be, you know, pros and cons to that sort of thing.
Like maybe if your character is from a lower caste.
Yeah. You know, there could immediately be implications that you're just not worthy because, you know, maybe it's a, you know, in the blood thing, you know, it's a lineage thing, you know, because of that caste, you know, or maybe it's just because, like I said, darn dirty peasant, you know.
Or like you're from a family with a bad reputation.
Yeah, there's that too. Like in Star Wars, it's not explicitly stated, but it's frequently shown on camera and in the episodes that Twi'leks are typically slaves. You know, so most of the time when you see a Twi'lek, it's usually in like a dancer sort of thing or just a little peasant. You know, you rarely do you actually see the, you know, Twi'leks standing up. I think Bad Blood, they had just like liberated their planet or something like that, but even then they immediately went under the Imperial rule. So it's like, they really didn't gain anything, and the person who was in charge was already corrupt, which was noticeable on camera. Spoilers if you haven't seen it. It's not a spoiler for the whole episode, but I mean, there's things like that. So if you're playing a Twi'lek character in a Star Wars game, you're probably going to tackle that. You probably came from a lower caste. You didn't have the opportunities the others had. I mean, that's a great societal type of flaw to build from.
Okay, so how can you flip that?
Well, so let's pick on your character, for example. You picked up some skills that would not
I play a Twilight in our Star Wars game.
in a Star Wars game, yeah. You picked up on some skills that most people who are learning to fly a ship or trying to be a Jedi or whatever have you don't necessarily have. You are good with sleight of hand. You are, you've clearly got some street smarts. You've got some knowledge.
We just had a game
of the
this
appropriate
week.
cultures.
We just had a game this week where we were in a situation and she pulled out some street smarts and got him out of a tricky situation.
She basically manually Jedi mind tricked somebody.
She pickpocketed.
Came up with a little seduction, a little sweet kiss sort of thing, pickpocketed him, and said, "Oh, here's 50 credits for your, you know, for your troubles." So basically paid him with his own money. And he's like, "Oh, thanks."
And it worked out pretty well, and it was fun to watch because the dice worked out.
The dice worked out extremely well in that particular case. But yeah, I mean, that is a way to flip that to, you know, look at it. it's obviously there's going to be problems in the game that you shouldn't play up on because there's going to be people that look down on those types. But those types are obviously going to have certain skill sets that the others don't have. And that's a way to look at it, because they've had that opportunity.
Or, for example, I think that's an opportunity for a compassionate, like an empathetic boost when dealing with people from that lower caste as well. So like, you could talk to people and like show that rapport that other characters from a higher caste would not be able to, you know, interface as well. So
in the vampire game, when George was playing Remus, like as a homeless guy, you know, like, so he had his vampire was homeless. He was embraced in a park, and he was living in the park, and then Sophie not dealing well with homeless, and then Henri typically just fed on the homeless. So like, she didn't like homeless because they're homeless. Henri's like,
there's a
there's
a deeper meaning that nobody's ever asked her about it.
Yeah. Henri, like, they were easy to feed off of. That's so that for him it was just a food source. And so like, and then Remus talking to him was like, he's like, well, you're kind of like a twisted uncle. Wait a second, you do what? You know, so like, so working with that within the game was fun because we had our own little quirks and flaws and how to work with his, but then using that as a resource, like I can go talk to the people in the park. And he had connections with that, and that's not something we could do. And so
yeah, if we needed to gather information from the homeless people in our city, like my character could not do it.
Yeah, that's so, like the like if anybody's seen Fight Club, it's the same sort of mentality there. It's like the people you don't want to tick off the people who serve you your food or, you know, wait your tables or change your sheets or whatnot. They're going to know something you don't know, and they typically move between the ticks because people see them and don't really see them. You know, so there's all kinds of things that they might know or see, you know, or hear or have access to that you wouldn't, you know, automatically assume.
Yeah.
So.
And Henri had no idea. Like Remus is saying, we can go talk to the people in the park, and he's like, why? It'd be like, in his mind, it was like, we can go talk to cows. You know, it's just that's why would you talk to the cows? What are you gonna get out of that? You know, so he's like, no, that they might have information. He's like, well, they've got blood. What else? So so they're just working with the conversations on that and how they work. So like just little things of class, you know. Knight's Tale comes to mind with to see how Heath Ledger's character went from just
don't know about the music, but great movie.
Yeah, that's true. So he goes from this low-class character, then he learns how, and he grades up, and then he ends up in the stocks, and there's all these. So there's things to watch as progress as a character as it works through. So when you're creating a world as far as NPCs go, that's always fun. You know, like what's going to happen, what's going on with these characters. And a lot of times when you're creating a world, your character, your players, they don't ever get in the depth, you know, like it's an iceberg. It's always an iceberg with your players because you've got all this depth down here and all they see is a little bit at the top, you know, but it makes the world work when you're doing that too, though. Because in your own thing, this is all part of the puzzle. I need this and I need this. So if only you knew.
Okay, I'm going to skip the next one and come back to it. How about a magical or supernatural flaw? Any ideas? This is a little bit tricky. Like what I kind of meant by this one was like in Vampire the Masquerade, being unable to go out in sunlight is essentially a supernatural flaw. It's not like a physical one. So like a UV light would not have the same effect as the actual sun. So like
unless you're in an underworld setting. But I mean, yeah.
But so like the magical or supernatural, I'd say maybe like a curse. Yeah. A curse would be a really good.
Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, all those had classical curses of some kind.
True. So maybe,
I had
yeah.
a temporary flaw, remember when I got cursed with the
That was
underselling
funny.
English?
You want to explain what happened there?
Yeah, so,
We have him to thank for that
yeah.
line too.
So
That was good.
my character Damaris, in the vampire game, she has the ability to scry, which means I can basically look in a pool of water and see wherever I want to go, like looking on a Google Maps type of deal. If I'm looking for somebody or a location.
It's like your classic, like when you look at fables and whatnot, when the witch is toiling over
Pretty
a
much.
cauldron of
Yeah,
water.
that's- yeah.
They're saying some sort of phrase, they look into it, and all of a sudden they see what's going on, you know, miles away. That's
Yeah.
basically what she's doing.
Pretty much I'm spying on you from a distance in water.
Yeah.
So, well, we have a current villain arc at the moment where I basically was spying on her. And unfortunately, I think I did that one too many times. And on the third time, I basically got like a whiplash effect, which ended up her getting, what I found out later was getting cursed, and basically she could no longer speak English. She could only speak Gaelic. So nobody understood her. I was talking what with what I thought was English, but it was just coming out. Even writing was coming out in Gaelic. Like I completely uninstalled English when I was scrying on her, and it took me a while to figure out what the curse, that it was a curse, and I had to dig deeper to then find out, okay, how do I undo it? So thankfully I had the unweave ritual already, and it took me several tries to undo it, but I was successful. But there was like a good week where she couldn't speak any English. She knew one language, and that was her original language.
Yeah, it played out a lot like Liar Liar, the movie with Jim Carrey.
Yeah,
It's like
can
every
tell,
time he tried to lie,
The
it's
pen
like,
is blue.
yeah, the pen is royal blue. You know, and no matter what he did, you know, it's like anything to take the attention off your head, you know, sort of thing.
Yeah.
That was basically her, but everything was in Gaelic, but she understood it just fine. She
I
would
had to have my
relay, she
magic
would-
book translate for me. Yes,
Right.
I have a book
that speaks,
that
and of course,
speaks, and
and she didn't like it too much because he abbreviated what she would say.
totally just,
or you know, assume certain things, you know, and so.
He's a bit of an unreliable resource.
think Venom from Spider-Man, that's his personality.
I used a curse as a DM when I was, my son had just gotten into D&D, and he was like maybe in 6th grade, and so his friends wanted to play too. So I've got a group of 6th graders at my table, and they're not following the basic law of don't split up the party. So like the 5 of them all want to do their own thing. And so I'm like, oh, okay, you know, and it's so like I'm trying to do this, and they're all like, they're getting bored as this one's doing the other 4, and I'm like, the heck with it. So I curse them. They go out to a bar together, they drink, and so I have them have this drink that now bonds them together. And the farther apart they get, they start taking damage. So, so like, yeah, so I'm like, so that's how so they learned real quick, you need to stay together as a party, you know, so like, so, and it's like, and one of them like, wait a second, am I getting sick because of, I don't know, really your intelligence? And like, there's a good chance it's because of what oh, okay. So, and then, so like, I did that as a DM, and then they were like, out of character, they're like, oh, maybe it's better if we stay together. So in character, so I just like, the heck with this. You're you're getting too far apart, you're taking damage, and they're like, so I'm gonna go back to the group. Well, you know, you stop taking damage, you know, like. So you can use magical and curses in a way that's, as a game master, that's going to make your game work better for you as well. And then just, in the White Wolf system, there's a system called Mage, where you can play a magic user, and when they use magic the wrong way, weird stuff happens to them. And so...
Yeah, reality snaps back and puts them in their place.
And the storyteller on this one did my character, I don't remember what the heck I did that made reality snap back on me, but he took a basic thing was, I reversed my digestive system. Instead of eating with my mouth, I was now pooping out of my mouth, and the food had to be inserted the other way, and so like that was the magical physical curse my guy had at that point. It's like, it's time for dinner. I'm gonna go over here, you know. So like, that was
That's rough.
yeah. Oh yeah, it was rough, you know. So it's like, It took a while to fix that curse, you know, but I was working on that curse to fix it, you know.
You're gonna need a hell of a lot of vino.
Talk about bad breath, I'll tell you, so, it's like.
Okay, so, I guess we can just touch lightly on so the last one is, a flaw that's, or something that's a flaw in the context of your world, but maybe not in like the real world. So like, for example, in Harry Potter, being a mudblood, that kind of goes back to society, but like, obviously that's not something that, you know, is a thing here. But like if you have your own world, or you're playing in a specific world, there are like specific things to the lore of your world that you can use to give your characters flaws. So okay, so we've talked about a lot of different kinds of flaws. Let's talk about some of the pitfalls that you need to watch out for. Todd kind of touched on this a little bit earlier about making sure that it is not like the essence of your character, but it is just an aspect of your character. So like, how often should you bring it up? How far do you take it? Let's talk about some of those.
I think research is kind of important for some of the flaws,
Yeah.
depending on the type of flaw that you're wanting to portray, and do it correctly and not offensively. There is always going to be a fine line where if the flaw that you have chosen to take, such as maybe a social one where you're, you know, you're just antisocial. So you're just never hanging out. You're that one person that's just always on the wall. You're that wallflower. That's, to me, that is a pitfall. It means you're not engaging in other characters. You're not engaging in the story. You're not moving anything along. So for me, that would be taking it a bit too far. Or maybe the opposite, where you play a character that has anger management issues, but maybe you're yelling at somebody. Like you're at that point where you're yelling at them and you're taking it too far. I've had that happen before.
Yeah,
it's not fun.
I agree. Yeah. I'd say rule number one with the flaws is, and in gaming in general, is that this is a group experience, and you want to make sure that you can play well with everybody in the group. I mean, you can make your character standoffish to an extent that doesn't trip up the forward movement of the game.
Yeah, there's definitely a limit to where that should go, and I think that's where newer players or immature players usually end up triggering the horror stories of D&D that you see on YouTube or Reddit, forums or whatnot, where and same thing with DM, storyteller, SD, whatever you want to call it. They don't have a good grasp of what it is they're doing, and they hyper fixate on what it is their character does. Like, well, I'm always angry. Okay, well, I mean, sure, you can always be. Wolverine's constantly angry. Even he has a moment every so often of lucidity where maybe Jean Grey walked by and got his attention, or maybe he got a cigar and calmed down or something. There's always a moment there.
He's an angry little ball of anger, but he also has a bit of a bleeding heart where like children,
right? Yeah,
innocence,
exactly. Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's I guess at that point, and I've talked to a couple of times. It's kind of jumped over to this at other panels that we've had. Sometimes you're going to have that conversation, especially if the player doesn't really seem to be getting it, because they may not actually know that. Give them that grace that they may not fully understand what's going on, and have that side conversation with them, and just take them off the side. You don't have to do it in the middle of the game, and talk to them about, okay, well, yes, you are 100% accurate. You have that flaw. Right, but there are times in the story it doesn't have to come up. It doesn't always have to be the focal point, because at some point, again, let's pick on anger here, for example, or the trope of everybody trying to be drunk constantly, in a game. That could seriously derail somebody's enjoyment of the game. And as Brittany pointed out, it's a group effort. The whole point there is it's not your story, it's everybody's story. It's the world's story. Sometimes it takes somebody actually explaining that for some of that to come back around and realize it. And it doesn't mean it's the end of the world for your character. Doesn't mean that the sense or sensibility about your character gets deflated. It doesn't mean that you've lost a step or anything like that. I've had some players tell me that sometimes that as I've been running the game, it's like, I don't know if this is really working out or whatnot. Well, okay, then now's the time to maybe explore it. Don't give up on it. Explore the flaw. Maybe now it's time that you try moving on from that flaw. And
go to therapy like Ben, who's afraid of snakes.
Well, I mean, there's that. You don't actually have to role play that, but you can have that bro moment, like your brother character comes up to you, you get your fist bumped, like, hey, we gotta work on that or something. Okay, yeah, I get it. Or maybe the matron character, in your group just actually has a scene with you and says, hey, I noticed something's not right. And now you get to explain that little tidbit of maybe why you're angry, what happened in your character's backstory. Maybe you just needed to get that out. And now you could have had what could have been a really cool heart-to-heart scene, as opposed to just looking at it again as, points on a sheet and going, oh, well, I'm not really playing my character. You could turn that into something really, really good and enriched and a good character moment, where you walk away from the game, maybe you didn't beat up any bad guys, maybe you didn't score the big, loot or whatnot, but you walked away going whoa, that was a really cool part of the story arc. And that's the magic right there. That, if you can get that
guess
beats
what that's
all
called?
That's called role playing.
It's called a character arc.
Yeah, it's called
It's called growth.
growth.
Your flaws become your strengths.
Exactly.
And then you encounter something new that gives you a new chip on your shoulder.
Like maybe some new bad guy that shows up and everybody gets behind you beating the snot out of that guy.
Do we have any last comments before we go to questions?
Real quick with the, like you had said one of the things about research and as a player. So what's difficult I see as a storyteller and as a player sometimes is dealing with, it is just a game. It's just there for fun. But at the same rate, if you're not willing to do a little bit of research on it, maybe don't take that flaw.
Yeah, don't play it if you don't know it.
Yeah, if you don't know it. My character is going to be the smartest man in the world, but you're not very intelligent, so it's going to be kind of hard to play that. Or my character, so
For that, you just want to prep. Just give yourself some tips and prep on that.
Right, and prep it,
Yeah.
So that's, but that sometimes as a character, as a player, you've got to know, what am I willing to do to make this character work? If I can't just give them something. And also, as a player, being able to listen to the DM, I had a person one time that their character was racist, and I'm like, oh, okay, that was their flaw, they were racist. And so we'd be playing, and man, I'm like, wait, let's, you don't have to really play that much on being a racist, dude.
There's a fine line between, playing out a flaw and just being a jerk.
Right, and so, and being aware of that as a player, and then as a DM, the DM or the storyteller's responsibility of going. So there's definitely a relationship that's going on. Does your flaw completely overwhelm your character, and then is your flaw completely overwhelming the group? So it's something that you need to be aware of when you're playing that character, or when you're even creating an NPC, how that scene's going, what's going on.
I think it's a good idea to keep in mind the balance of your character.
Yes.
You need to have positive qualities that outweigh the negative qualities. Otherwise, you're not going to be very fun to play with.
Right. Yeah. So why don't we just go ahead and move on to, in general, questions or...
Whatever you guys want to talk about. We can talk about flaws, you can ask some general gaming questions or specific gaming questions. Before we get into that, I will mention we have another panel Sunday morning at 10:30 about world building. So world building for your game. So we can, if you want to come to that, we can get more in depth on world building stuff. But yeah, any gaming questions you guys have, if you want to talk more about flaws or character building or whatever, the floor is yours.
Yes, please, throw the questions at us.
What do you got for us? Anybody? Yeah.
When you have like a character, so as like a world builder, when you have a character give you a flaw, what are steps and things that you do to incorporate that into your storytelling to like bring that out or create scenarios where that flaw will manifest itself?
Oh, I love this.
Do you do it on purpose, Jerome?
I hope so.
Sometimes, yes. That's a great question. As a storyteller, you don't, the obvious answer is to say yes, right? But the problem with that is, it's like in wrestling, right? If any of you are fans of wrestling, right? If you see somebody do something in the ring, you're like, oh, they know sold that. You know, like you can tell right away, like that didn't go the way it should have gone. Storytelling is very similar. If you were setting something up and they know it's coming, you know, or they're like, or you've got the flaw in there, and you have players that are going like, oh, that's going to come up, that's a bad sign. Catch them when they're not ready. You know, you could be deliberate, but catch them when they're not ready. It's good. You're going to get a way bigger payoff for something like that. It's probably going to be funnier. You know, it's going to be more enjoyable. And you don't want to you don't want to oversell it too. Like there have been plenty of times where, like, okay, we'll say, you know, her character has a problem with homeless people.
It's like the third time we brought this up.
Right. You know, they're scary. She doesn't understand them. They're dirty. Blah 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 blah. Well, you know, there have been times where, you know, they've been out and about doing something, you know, in the city. I don't have to even bring it up. Like, I can just give an explanation of, like, what the scene looks like, and immediately it starts going like, oh, homeless people are probably going to gather here, right? And again, I don't have to do anything with it.
She's going to cross the street to walk on the other side.
Right, you know, or maybe it's a, you know, a soup kitchen or something, else. Right? You know.
Oh, yeah. That was the thing.
Right, yeah. So, or maybe it's like a soup kitchen, like you don't even have to say it's there. That's where you really get them. It's like, if the anticipation is built up, if you're getting them with what's really not there, now you've got them hooked. Because now they're like, ooh, you know, and they're worried about whatever, you know, the flaw might be that they've got. And now they're not only paying attention to the story, which is good. You want them paying attention to the story. But then the other thing is, now they're in their character. And they're in that mindset. And so now if you can keep occasionally throwing something out there appropriate to their characters, I find that they tend to respond more naturally and stay in character that way, as opposed to purposely, you know, doing it on those like, oh, here we go, oh, you know, you've stumbled onto a bar, ha ha, funny, you know, it's like, oh, now we've had alcohol around us again. You know, we've got some characters who have run into that sort of thing, and it's going to happen. But it's when you can catch them unawares. That's where I try to keep it. So I don't plan on it, but sometimes it will pop up.
I would hope that, I mean, one of my favorite things about playing is having things that are specific to my character come up in the story. Because then you get to, I mean, like, you put all that work into planning your character, and then, you know, then you get to play it out on screen. And I think that's a generally good DM who can incorporate all of those elements. One of my favorite things is when it involves another player, where you can tie two things together, maybe like set them at cross points, even like so like. I would think yes, as a DM, like eventually you're going to pull out those details, but like Jerome said, not at an obvious point.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I had a game where one of the characters, in his story arc, his sister had disappeared, and that was one of the reasons he was adventuring, was to try to find the whereabouts of his sister. So when he shows up in the city, and they're all investigating what's happening in the city and why is this haunted house and what's going on over here. And then as they're questioning things, it comes up, he finds out that there's a slave trade going on. And so in character, he's like, wait, hold on, is that slave trade, was that also involved over here in this city? So I added that in. That wasn't part of the original story that I had, but when they found out, he tells me his sister's missing, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna find out, I'm gonna create something to work with that. So, and again, it's not obvious, it's not right there, but as they're going through, that came up and he's like, well, wait a second, slave trade, hold on. And so he started asking me about that, and then that became like this secondary story arc for him, that maybe that's where my sister went, and then to work that through. So it doesn't have to be the main arc of everything, and it is awesome when you tie characters together with something from their past. Now they've got an extra bond at that point. It's like, well, wait, you know him too? I hate him too. Or what's worse is, you know him too? I hate him. Well, that's my ex-girlfriend. Or that's my wife, you know? That's so like, so then it becomes...
Then you have new flaws that they have to
Yeah,
work
new
through.
flaws after that.
Yeah, but great question, thank you. Any others?
Yeah.
Have any of you ever played or recommendations for or against playing somebody with multiple personality
Multiple
disorder?
personality disorder.
That's happened.
It's hard.
I've run into it a lot. Not so much lately.
We can talk about George.
But that was a good point, yes. So yes and no. I would only recommend it to a seasoned veteran player. And I'm talking the type of person who's actually going to play a character, not just, okay, well, I do this, okay, well, I do that, but like actually play it. So because one of the things I tell people now, it's our friend Brianna, who was just here, it's like, not only are you interacting with the fun, like as a storyteller or player, whatnot, but so like when we're playing online, not only are we playing for people who might tune in, but we're also our own audience, right? So if you've got somebody like that who is going to go so they're going to go to that level, people are going to start watching that and going, okay, I'm seeing the ticks now, right? That can be a lot of fun. We had a character who in Vampire, and actually kind of in the Anne Ricean world as well, they have this thing where, like, if you feed off another vampire, you take their essence and their power. But if they happen to be too powerful, then you're probably going to lose yourself. Like, something of that person's going to show up or could completely subsume who you were, right? Well, that happened in this particular game. He got forced into what was called a frenzy, so he lost control of himself, ate another vampire, and then he had this other personality residing in the back, who every so often, when he would black out, became somebody else. Now, as a player, I had a side conversation with him so he could eventually kind of figure it out. But for a while, I was giving him, I took it from ground zero. So what I did is I would start giving him blackout moments, and he would start winding up with weird stuff he purchased. You know,
A golden
It's
toilet.
like ordering things on Amazon when you're drunk.
right, exactly, like drunk ordering from Amazon.
Ordering
So
on
it's like at
QVC
one
late at
point, you know,
night.
he because the guy he ended up consuming was the complete opposite of like
Old and rich and snooty.
old rich money, snooty.
And he was
you
old
know,
and homeless.
and
Or
didn't like
young and
people,
homeless.
didn't want to be
Yeah.
around people, right? Wanted servants, that sort of thing. So
More of a behind the scenes.
one of the first things he encountered when he had that blackout is he realized he had a servant. And he's like, wait, who are you? What? And so this guy's like, oh, well, we signed the contract, you know, I'm your servant. He's like, okay, walk me through this like I never encountered this before. Like what? And so then he just kind of went with it. And then eventually it got to the point where the two personalities would start to interact in his head. And so what he as a player would do, so he could have a side conversation with me, is he would do this. Like so he's basically making a phone call to the other person in the back of his head and having that conversation, even though they had access to their own ability. He was role playing it out.
Okay.
So if you can get that, great. What I find what happens a lot is people tend to use, there's a term in, and this is where it pops up a lot, and I think you'll understand why. There's a term in vampire circles, the vampire game, for like Malkavians. It's a very common that they take multiple personalities, and they're called like fishy bunny Malkavians, or they're called fish Malkavians, because what they do is they just play it off like this other personality is just total slapstick, like Harley Quinn Joker sort of thing, and it's just completely disruptive, and ultimately it's dumb. Like maybe it's funny like the first game or something because you thought, okay, it would be fun for a chuckle, but then every time you try to do something legit in a game or something serious or progress a story, they're off over the side going like, ha ha ha, slapping people with fish. And it gets to, it's degrading to people who actually have that sort of problem. And it's ridiculous to the players who are trying to put up with it because, they're trying to get their enjoyment too, right? They're trying to have fun and do something. And people like that, when they do that sort of thing, have what, and most everybody I think has heard of this, the main character syndrome. And that's usually what they're going for. They want to be the star of the story, and that's how they manifest it. It's this goofy secondary or third personality or something. So.
What's the movie? There's Unbreakable Glass, and then
Split.
Split
Was great.
Split is a fantastic example. If you're struggling or your player's struggling, Split is the movie to watch.
That was a really good one.
Because Fight Club.
Fight Club's Fight Club you don't really, I guess after watching the movie you can see it.
Technically we don't talk about Fight Club right now.
Yeah. But with Split you can actually see it happening when it's going through. So it's not the slapstick aspect. It's definitely different characters. And then the characters know about each other. So having a seasoned character, it takes a lot to be able to do that well. That's part of it. And then whatever game system you're in, it has to be role play heavy. Because if you're just doing a D&D dungeon crawl, it doesn't work, because when is that ever going to come up unless, like, okay, well now I'm playing this other character, but we're not really role playing it, so it doesn't really work towards that. But if you're role play heavy, it can be a lot of fun, But you definitely, it's got to be a conversation between the storyteller and the player ahead of time to say, what are we doing with this? I had a guy that he did like 10 different characters, and he had a character sheet for each character, and so he had some intense detail on how he did this, and I'm like, dude, that's impressive, So so that was awesome the way he did that. He put a lot of thought into it. When we would play, he played it well. But I've seen the fish guys too, and I do this now. It's like, can you stop doing that? So that's when a flaw is no longer a flaw. It's just something that's specifically meant to derail, so.
Yeah. I think we're over now.
Yeah, we are out of time.
So we're out of time. You can find us on Twitch at Lost Tribes Gaming. We're also on Facebook and YouTube.
That's the same name.
Same name. We have a panel Sunday morning at 10:30. Do you know if it's in this room?
No, it's in your program guide, but it's in the anime group, I think, or something. I forget the number offhand.
And if you would like some swag and you didn't get some, we have buttons and a few keychains and a few magnets. So if you're welcome to come up and grab one of those.
And thank you for coming.
And thank you for coming.
The more you know. Yes, thank you. And all of our games are bi-weekly. We have a total of 5 games that
we
we
didn't
run.
mention what games we do.
Yeah, so I run Vampire the Masquerade, Marvel Superheroes, Cyberpunk,
Street Fighter,
and Star Wars. So yeah, we got a little bit of everything.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for coming, everybody. You guys for stopping by.
Cyberpunk 2020, whatever.
2020.
Yes.
We take place in 2030.
Yeah, I actually follow the timeline for 2077 and read, which is 2045, I think, or something like that. But I actually haven't gotten a chance really to sit down and read the Red rules yet, so I'm still playing.
Haven't they released like multiple new versions of the rules for that?
No, it's just Cyberpunk Red at this point is the most recent, and that is set in like 2045 now. And then of course Cyberpunk 2077, the video game actually continues that story up.
Yeah.
I didn't head out,
Thanks.
so
Yeah.
I'll see you guys sometime during the week.
Yep.
Hi, Rachel.
Sorry, we encroached on your
No, that's all right, there's a half hour,
transition
Yeah.
time.
half hour in between.
I like that.
Yes, that was a smart decision when they included that.
Yeah, that's way better than 10
Yeah,
minutes.
because last year we, when we were doing a panel, like we had people coming in like 5 minutes till, something like that, and trying to set up. And like, guys, we're not even done.
Talk and they're walking in.
Good morning, Dave.
Can you get the other side of the bar?
Glad I kept this thing.
My backpack.
3 or 4 years ago. Same one. Especially useful today when, what do you call it, I got my car in the shop, so.
Oh, yeah, did you have to take light rail down?
No,